Hey everybody, it's Sean, and let's make some comics. So today I wanted to talk about the great debate when it comes to creating a comic, specifically writing a comic, and that is the two sides. You have the planners and the pantsers. Full disclosure, I don't love the term pantser because to me it sounds like somebody who's either dropping pants or pulling pants down. I don't know, I get a sense of violation when I hear pantser, but for whatever reason, that's the nomenclature that we've decided as a creative community as part of this process. So, just in case you haven't heard, planners, all they are people who fully plan their story from beginning to end. They know exactly what's going to happen every stage of their narrative. Easy enough. Pantsers, again, not my favorite term. Pantsers write by the seat of their pants. What they do is they have a general idea of their story and then they just tippity tap type it away and let the spirit move them to take that story wherever they want to. They are just free forming, mainlining the creative source of the universe and surprising themselves with what comes out on the page. So let's talk a little bit about the pros and the cons of both of these. And if you've heard these points before, you haven't heard them from me, so that makes it worth listening to, right? All right, let's start with the pantsers. So, what is the benefit? Well, it's very creative, right? I mean, all writing is inherently creative, but if you're writing by the seat of your pants, that means you can just take inspiration as it comes. It can be free form. You can just let the words come onto the page and develop into these wonderful, surprising, exciting narratives. So, why wouldn't you want to do that? What could possibly be the downside? I think anyone who's actually written this fashion knows what the downside is. Inevitably, if you are just embracing all of that freedom, you may find yourself written into a corner. You may have these really great ideas for crises, but the resolution, you didn't plan it out. So now you have to solve it. And maybe there's no way to solve it. So what happens? Quite often there's a deus ex machina. So all of a sudden, God descends from the clouds to solve the problem. A power that your character never had before develops, or some new character no one ever heard about all of a sudden moves in to resolve the conflict. And that's not satisfying. It's not satisfying for the reader, and we all know it's not satisfying for the reader. We hate to see it. And it happens. It happens to the best of them. One of my favorite authors, not really a comic writer, though he has collaborated on those projects, is Stephen King. He's from Maine. He's great. I think we're all familiar with his work. He is a pantser, and as a result, quite often his endings are terrible. And that's no slight against him. He knows it. He's well aware of how he ends his stories. They're not always very neat. And unfortunately, as consumers, we have a recency bias in terms of how we view a story. If it doesn't nail the landing, that can ruin everything. There was a TV series involved some thrones and some dragons. Didn't quite stick the ending, and it went from being beloved to becoming universally derided. We all know what we're talking about. And believe it or not, the person who wrote that original series, Martin, George R. R. Martin, he's a famous pantser too. And that brings us to the second problem. You just can't get yourself out of the corner you've written yourself into, and your project stops. That's it. You didn't end it how you wanted to. You couldn't find your way to the end, so the project loses all of its momentum, and you're left with an audience who's irate and pestering you every hour of every day on when you're going to complete the project. And you can't complete it because there's no end, because you didn't think of the end, because you just have a vague idea. So that's why you don't want to be a pantser, right? You can have an unsatisfying ending, or you may not even have an ending at all. But it is fun. The process is fun. It's more creative. It's more freeform. So let's talk about the other side of the coin, the planner. And again, planning really straightforward elementally. All you're looking for is a plan from beginning to end. You have every chapter planned out. You know exactly what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and who it's going to happen to. So why doesn't everyone write that way? Clearly, it's the best way. You're not going to get yourself trapped in a corner. You're not going to have to use Deus Ex Machina or any other plot contrivances to solve a problem that you weren't anticipating. Why doesn't everyone do that? And the answer is it's kind of boring. When you know how everything's going to end, you can lose some of that spark and creative fire that makes your story interesting. And if the creator is bored, there's a chance that the audience is going to be bored too. The passion of discovery when it comes to creating a project really can't be overstated. Passion makes a difference. And if you know every twist and turn in development, well, that can ruin it. Speaking of ruining it, you might have just heard my dog there. I apologize. He probably saw a squirrel or a bird or maybe a madman trying to break in and kill me. If this actually cuts off unexpectedly, it was probably the latter, and I apologize for the trauma I'm about to inflict on you. At any rate, what was I saying? Okay, yeah, so planning can be boring. That's its biggest downfall. And it can be limiting. You may think of a really great idea halfway through, and if you're a dedicated planner and you're sticking to your script, there's no room for that inspiration to take hold. So that can be a downside too. Now, you might have noticed, just from the way I'm talking about these two modalities, on which my bias lays. I am more of a planner than a pantser. I do have a plan for where my stories are going to go, but I am not a strict planner, and I am certainly not a pantser. Instead, what I think I am is the new third way, the best way, the Sean way, and that is I'm a planter. Yep, I've combined the two. It's a clever portmanteau of plan and pants into plant. And it's good because here's what a planter does. You come up with the seed of an idea and you plant it into the fertile soil of your mind and you let it develop, but you know exactly what you're growing. So if I plant tomato seeds, I know I'm going to get ripe, red, delicious tomatoes at the end of the summer. And that is how this method works. So come up with your idea, come up with your character. And when I say character, I mean you really have to develop these characters. They are going to be the special sauce. They are going to be the watering can for your plants. Because even if you don't know every in and out of your story, but you know where they start and you know where they end, having a strong character and watching them grow and develop and allowing them to change, that is going to make your story excellent. So take special care to develop your character when you're going through this method. And the other side of that is let them change. Let them move in unexpected ways. As you move them through the story, you're going to see them develop in ways you weren't anticipating at first. And you need to embrace that. Watch them go through an evolution, and you'll be surprised. Your audience will be surprised, and they'll be satisfied because at the end, it's coming to the culmination that you already set for them. There's no need to introduce new magical plot conveniences. There's no need to all of a sudden backtrack and add a new character to solve all the problems because you worked that out in advance. You may not have worked out every detail though. And those gaps in the story, those details that you've allowed to move in on their own term and grow with you, those can be some of the most special parts. So those are really the 2 or 3 ways it comes to developing a story. And I'm curious which way you go on it, which way you think is the best, what works for you. And really, even though I may have sounded a little judgmental about pantsing, it's fine. It's a good way as any. Just do me a favor. Really try and come up with at least the beginnings of an ending before you get there. Just so we can have that satisfaction. I'm realizing I'm even asking the pantsers to be planners, but just know kind of a rough outline, please, of how the whole thing is gonna end. Just so we're not feeling left unsatisfied by a strange turn where a once beloved character starts acting like a genocidal maniac, and the person who clearly should be on the throne is sent to be an exile in the north, and then this other character gets to be king for some reason. I don't know. All right, I was going to wrap it up here, but let me just talk a little bit more about this. This isn't Game of Thrones strictly, but I feel like this is kind of what happened. I think for some writers, they get irritated and can become vindictive against their audiences. And what I mean by this is there may be some audience theories about where a series is going. It could be a comic book or a series of novels or movies or TV show. There are fan theories. People love to theory craft. It's actually, I think, a really healthy part of a fandom is coming up with new ways to explain where things could be going or what's going to develop. And I just get the sense that some writers resent this, and if their resolution was guessed, then they will just go ahead and maliciously, spitefully subvert that ending, change the ending because the audience guessed it, and that is so the wrong thing to do, because the audience doesn't know for sure. Even if they're just speculating, even if it's a fan theory that happens to be 100% correct, that just means you've laid all of the groundwork to allow them to get to a well realized, well reasoned finale. And why would you spoil that? Let them be right. It's okay. You can let people on the internet be right. You don't need to go out of your way to prove them wrong. That just seems silly. And again, I have no proof that anyone has done this. It's just a suspicion I have. So anyway, don't be spiteful to your audience. If they guessed the ending, great. That just means they were paying attention. Honestly, it really is a good sign that your narrative is well crafted. Anyway, now I'm just rambling. I'm just rambling purely at this point. Thanks for making it this far, if presuming you didn't end it a while ago. Again, I applaud you. You are a saint. And I should probably mention about doing this in the beginning, but again, go ahead, like, share, subscribe, comment. I really want your comments on this one. I really want to know where everybody's weighing in terms of planning or writing by the seat of your pants, or if maybe we could crowdsource a new term for pantsers. I just hate it so much. I can't state it enough. Someone come up with a good new idea. Anyway, I've said too much already. Thanks again for your time. I hope you're out there and creating stories of your own that are going to delight and surprise me and everyone else. And most of all, please, let's just go make some comics.